Welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm Andrew Miller. Got Christian Ballard here with me. Ballard back on the show. I wasn't able to be with us for the post game after Southern Miss, but we got you back. Not a fun weekend for you, but
Oh, I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and rehash all that. It happened, and we're going to focus on Mississippi State. That's going to be the focus of the show.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mississippi State does get the win, as we talked about, over Southern Miss to open up the season, and now they move ahead into week 2 for what is a pretty pivotal game for the season when they take on the Arizona State Sun Devils. So we're going to break down ASU, talk about what we saw from them in week 1 of the season against Northern Arizona, a game that was a little bit closer than they would have liked it to have been.
Mhm.
And also, but again, that's probably not, can't take too much away here early in the season. And more than likely, they're still going to be the team we thought they would be, which is a really, really good football team. So we'll break down ASU, give our early thoughts on that matchup, but also do want to get a chance. Obviously, Christian was not here, so he didn't get to give his thoughts. Just a quick look back at Southern Miss. But as for those of you joining into the show, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on that notification bell if you have not already. And, hey, share the stream. We really appreciate those of you who are helping us grow this thing. And look, the subscribers keep going up. It's really cool to see. It's cool to see the interaction we've been getting on the shows. And we want to see this thing get bigger and bigger as the football season goes along. So we appreciate all of your support.
For
Obviously,
sure.
State gets the win over Southern Miss, 34-17. Not the best first half. Offensively in particular, they kind of hit a wall and were struggling to get much of anything going for a while there. Defense, I thought, was holding up their end of the bargain and actually performed pretty well. And then the second half, you see that defense really continue to perform well. And the offense finally found its rhythm. 21 straight points there in the third quarter to put the thing completely out of reach. Christian, just for you on the rewatch and going back and looking, what are some of the big takeaways that you had in the Bulldogs' victory over USM to open up the season?
Well, I think it's safe to say that they were definitely a second half team. I think that they ended up, having a rough start. They couldn't get it going offensively. It seemed like the defense never really went away. Yeah, they gave up 17 points, but I think that's pretty comfortable for what you want to see from Mississippi State in an opener like that against a big rival on the road in Southern Miss. 34 points is pretty comfortable. I have to go back and watch just to remember what I predicted, but I think you and I kind of settled around 30, 35, or maybe even if you wanted to, 40 points would be comfortable. But they ended up with 34. Um, and it was one of those, especially in the third quarter, outscoring Southern Miss 21-0. I think that was a big factor with 3 touchdowns. You got the run game going with, just the running backs, Davon Booth and company. So many different weapons they have. But I look at it as they got off to the start they didn't want, but they got the result they definitely needed. When I look at back at this game for Mississippi State, watching the highlights, again, I didn't really get to see it live, so I had to go back and watch it before the show. So you probably seeing it live have a little bit more information for us. But from what I could tell, they looked like the Mississippi State from last year to start the game, but then they looked like a completely different rebuilt team when the second half kicked off, and they just kind of they just really took off with it. Whether they were able to find the end zone on every play or not, it just seemed like they got it going.
I think that's a fair way of looking at it. What you said about they got off to the start they didn't want, but in the second half you got what you wanted to see. I think that's accurate. And Jeff Lebby talked about in the post game that this was very much a case of, look, first half they kept shooting themselves in the foot, and it was a lot of
Mhm.
self-inflicted mistakes with the penalties, the issues up front. Obviously, Blake Shapen throwing an interception there on the second drive. Um, the part that was different from last year in the first half is that defensively you were still playing well. I mean, look, Southern Miss, the first points they get are off that interception where they're set up deep in state territory, and the defense calmly forces a 3-and-out to hold them to a field goal, which is as good as you could ask for right there. And then, they put together a touchdown drive later where there were a couple busts, but at the same time, I'm not expecting that you weren't going to allow Southern to put together a drive there. So defense really did step up, but offensively, yeah, it was not the start they needed, but a point Shapen talked about it, but Lebby talked about it as well, is when you've got a veteran quarterback and some wideouts who have played a lot of football, like those guys were willing to just, not just willing, but they were able to respond and say, it doesn't really matter that we got off to a slow start. It's not a big deal. As long as we execute, stop making errors, we're going to win this football game. And the second half, I think, is a much better encapsulation of what this game probably should have been. And for as much as the first half would leave you worried, the fact they cleaned up the errors that they did in the second half and pulled away does leave me feeling a little bit better, because you look at the game, it's like, okay, like first game of the season on the road, they had some dumb mistakes early and let it be close, but in the second half, they cleaned those things up and they pull away. And you see, okay, they're clearly the better team. It's not even close. Sure, you would have loved to have seen that over the course of 4 quarters. I'm willing to pass some of it off for just the week one-iness of it all, and it not have to be an encapsulation of what the team is going to be for the season going forward. I tweeted out SP Plus. They do, and Bill Connolly, he does his post-game win expectancies and also adjusted scoring margins for games. So, post-game win expectancy, if the game played out the way that it typically played out on the factors that we believe to be predictable and repeatable, how likely is this final score? How likely is this going to be the final score? And obviously, Mississippi State's post-game win expectancy was 100%. There was nothing about that game that would suggest that State shouldn't have won every single time. But what stood out was the adjusted scoring margin. In the game State wins by 17, the adjusted scoring margin was like 30-plus points. According to that model, Mississippi State should have won this game by 30, like with the way the game played out. And you see that with the penalties that happened there, with just some of the missed opportunities. Obviously, Southern getting a late touchdown drive with the 3rd and 4th stringers in, which that's not really going to impact things. What up, Jay? Glad to have you in here. Appreciate it. You look at those factors and it's like, okay, this game was really not close, which is why I do think it's funny. I can't help but go and read the comments from Southern Miss fans. And one, it is very funny to see all the Southern Miss fans on Twitter, all 10 of them, because only 10 exist. And if you find more than 10 Twitter accounts, it's because they've all made multiple Twitter accounts. That's what's happened. Of the 10 that exist, and then all of the burners that they have, it's very funny to see all of them that were tweeting up until the game, and like right up to the game, they were like, "We got this," and then all of a sudden they stopped tweeting after the game. That's quite funny from all of them. But I've also been perusing their message board and seeing some of the comments from them, like disappointed that the game played out the way it is, and oh man, we were in that thing in the first half, and it's like, guys, one, the only reason you were in this game is because Mississippi State allowed you to be in the game with the way they were playing in the first half, so just some of the mistakes they were making. Two, if you're a Southern Miss fan and you were judging the rest of the way of your season's going to go off of losing a game by a lot to a SEC team, I understand there is the in-state rivalry aspect of you have higher expectations. I understand a lot of you have this mindset of it's a 2-10 Mississippi State team. This Mississippi State team's a lot better than you guys realize. And Southern Miss, I'll be fair to them. They're going to be a better team this year. That is a team that I think can be competitive within the Sun Belt. I don't think they're going to win the league, but like other defenses are not going to be able to compete with the way that State did. This game was a lot lopsided than the score tells. Yeah, no, you're right. The final score is not indicative of the way this game ultimately played out. This was a game heavily in favor of Mississippi State. Yes, they made mistakes. They cleaned them up in the second half. They got to clean up a lot going forward. With Arizona State coming to town and how you're going to deal with that. But look, all in all, it was a good performance for the Bulldogs. Not good. It was a fine performance, I guess I should say. And if you got what you got in the second half, the entire game, you're walking away feeling fine. From Trey, do any of your expectations or predictions change based off of game one? No. I mean, look, you're going to have some takeaways, and I would say I feel slightly better about the defense. They performed better than I thought they did. I had Southern Miss scoring, look, my final score prediction, I was basically off on a touchdown I had both teams scoring one more touchdown. I had 41-23 as my final. It was 34-17. I thought Southern Miss would score more. I also thought State would score more. The margin basically worked out to be about the same. So I feel slightly better about the defense because they did perform better than I expected them to in this game. I'm not going to suddenly sit here and tell you they're going to be good enough to really slow down the better offenses they're going to face on this schedule. We'll get a much better idea of that after this game against Arizona State that does have a pretty talented offense and some really, really good playmakers and quarterback. But I do feel a little bit better. Offense, I feel a little worse. I needed to see more from the offensive line. They definitely did not perform the way that you would have liked to have seen. Was hoping for some more explosive plays as well, but some of that does lend into how Southern Miss was playing the game and that they were trying to make sure they didn't allow a lot of explosive plays. So, I guess a little bit it kind of bounces out, right? I feel a little bit better about the defense, but a little bit worse about the offense. Not enough to change my predictions. This is still, in my mind, a 4 or 5 win team when it's all said and done. We'll see if that changes here this week against Arizona State. But, yeah, I feel mostly fine with what we saw. Jeff Lebby in his press conference today, not much of note to be had. Kind of just reiterating a lot of the points they made in the postgame, that it was about getting out of their own way, not making a lot of those self-inflicted errors. And once you did that, they were going to be fine to be able to get the win. And pointing out Arizona State that they've got some really explosive playmakers, as we'll talk about here in a sec. One thing he did talk about injuries going into this game. State was down a pair of potential starters, Luke Work at guard and Jet Jefferson at corner. Both those guys were not dressed out. Jefferson was rolling around on a scooter in the pregame. Lebby was asked about those guys. He said for Luke, he feels good, not great about getting him back. He'll have to see how he performs at practice, but I guess cautiously optimistic would be the way you go there. You think you could have him back, which would be big for the offensive line, obviously. That's a guy who was a starter for you a season ago, and while your concerns in this last game were at tackle and not at guard, Luke is a guy who played tackle for you a season ago. So having him in, even though he's a guard this season, gives you some options to move guys around if you need to. So that'd be, if you can get him back, that'd be a big deal. Jay point, Jamil Burrow's banged up too. Yeah, and that's another one we're still waiting on. He doesn't have an answer on Jamil yet, which I don't feel like he made a huge impact week one. I felt like of the interior guys, DJ Reed, which I didn't even point him out in the post game because I just didn't really catch on to it, but like he was making a much bigger impact than I think a lot of us expected he was going to. And then Jere Bledsoe played really well at nose tackle. Those two guys stood out. But yeah, Jamil is a guy, if he gets healthy and you get the type of talent he could be, you definitely want him back. But yeah, for Luke, he feels good, not great. You would like to get him back because of what it helps you do from a versatility standpoint up front. And then said for Jefferson, I'm not ready to say Jet will be ready to go tomorrow morning. I'm trying to okay. It's all about Tuesday's practice. How are these guys functioning as they get into physical long practice on Tuesday morning? That's where we can understand are these guys going to be ready. Same with Blake. Okay, so I guess he's putting Blake kind of in a similar spot as Luke Work. Blake did not have a great game on Saturday. He struggled a lot, and the offensive line, frankly, played better once he went out, which you hate to say that. You don't want to talk about, well, you were better off because the guy got hurt. Obviously, you'd rather have the ability to play him than not. So, we'll see what happens there. But, look, that's a guy that you are counting on to an extent this season. So, you're definitely hoping he's healthy and hoping that he can perform a little bit better than he did in week one. But we'll see there. I mean, if you get Luke Work back, you're probably in a similar spot to where you were this past week, all things considered. But Jefferson, that's a concern. I mean, you definitely want to get him back. But at the same time, State's corners played really, really well. Kelly Jones was, I thought, one of the most impressive Bulldogs of the day this past Saturday. And Diego Brumfield showed up as well. Like, those guys were up to the task. And if those guys are going to be – if that pair is going to be – if that's how they play all season, man, you're going to be in a pretty good spot going forward. So, that's kind of the injury update. We'll see what happens with those guys. But I would still feel mostly okay about State from a health standpoint going to this game. There's nothing that stands out too heavily for me. All right, let's talk about Arizona State since that is the game, and we'll start off with a preview of the Sun Devils. And this is an Arizona State team that has really high expectations coming into this year because they greatly overperformed last season. That's a team that 2 years ago in year one under Kenny Dillingham goes 3-9. And then part of sort of a complete rebuild for that program. Last year they burst onto the scene and they're an 11-win team. They win the Big 12. They go to the college football playoff and had a chance against Texas. I mean, probably should have won that game when it was all said and done. I know they had to come back from down quite a bit, but once they got back into that thing, it looked like they were going to win it and ultimately didn't. But this is a team that now brings back basically everybody not named Kim Scatabo, both between the offense and the defense. They ended up being a pretty good defensive team last year, had some fun playmakers on offense. And again, this is a team, I think they're number 11 in the country, could be top 10 once the AP poll comes out tomorrow, although week one was not the most impressive showing for them, so they may not move up. But this is a really good ASU team coming to town. And before we just get into some of the specifics, I mean, Christian, what are your overall thoughts of the Sun Devils and just the matchup for MSU, just from a 1,000-foot view?
Yeah, I think that they're definitely going to have a challenge on their hands. Mississippi State will with Arizona State coming to town. But I think it's a big opportunity for the Bulldogs to make a statement, get a stamp, like that signature victory this year. I think that is possible. It being at home in Starkville, and then you look at it being a 7:30 kickoff Eastern time. That is, at home. It's going to be a night game. You look at Mississippi State, and they. I mean, this is. I guess it's the home opener because they went to Southern Miss. So, I mean, that's huge, man. And you'd hate to lose that. And I feel like I'm just very optimistic for the Bulldogs this year to get better each week. I'm not saying that it's going to be win and then win again, but I could see where they have areas of improvement. And I feel like Jeff Lebby wants to let these guys know, hey, this is not a team, this is going to be a tough challenge for us. I get it, but overall, this is going to be one of those games we not only feel like we need to compete in, but we want to compete in. I feel like this is that game because you're not playing Texas or Ohio State. We just had a big game with that. You're not playing a Penn State. You're playing Arizona State. And when I say it like that, what I'm saying is, yes, you're playing a tough team, but it's not the biggest challenge in the world. Now, it might be the biggest challenge on their schedule right now, but I don't think that this is an Arizona State team that's going to come in to Starkville and just play how they want to play against the Bulldog defense. And I would even say the defense of Arizona State uh, might not play how they want to against the offense. When you talk about Arizona State, they might have won and put up 38 points on Northern Arizona, and Sam Levitt's a great quarterback. He was their lead rusher. He was also the lead passer as the quarterback, obviously. But against Northern Arizona at home, you give up 19 points. Now, I don't know what to make of that team, but I got to think that there's some holes and some question marks for the Sun Devils going into this next game.
Yeah, let's talk about that game. So the Sun Devils get the win over Northern Arizona, 38-19. Kind of some politics at play. You'll notice if you ever pay attention to FCS football and the NAU Lumberjacks, annually they play either Arizona State or Arizona. It is a mandated thing by the state government that one of the power conference teams has to play NAU on an annual basis. So kind of just a little interesting factoid there. So basically, one of them is always going to be playing an FCS team, and it's going to be NAU. And look, NAU is a good FCS program. They were a playoff team a season ago. They're a top 20 type team within the FCS. So they are a talented team. But obviously, if you're talking about a top 12 college, FBS team and a college football playoff participant, you feel like you should be able to handle business a little bit more. Tucker Medlin checking in here, late arriving, but I need Andrew's thoughts on Dillingham saying there are no hotels in Starkville that aren't casinos. I'll get to that in a sec. I don't. Yeah, I'm not going to overreact to that, but I'll address it. But look, NAU is a pretty good team. But again, if you're Arizona State, you feel like you should be able to handle them a lot better. And this is kind of a weird game for Arizona State. There were moments where it looked like they were completely dominant, and there were moments that kept getting in their own way. Really, the big thing here is they were bad on third down. They went 1 for 10 on third downs, and they were just kind of inefficient at times. Their offensive line allowed some pressure. Northern Arizona really brought a lot of exotic looks. They kind of dialed up a lot of different pressure looks, and that gave them some problems. The other big thing, and this is going to sound very reminiscent of what we're talking about with Mississippi State, they committed a lot of penalties. 12 penalties in this game for Arizona State for 90-something yards, and took a touchdown off the board, took a big play. It's funny, like they had a stretch where they have a screen pass that goes for like a 70-yard touchdown, called back for penalty. The very next play, Sam Levitt hits a huge play down the field that's going to be like a 60-yard gain. It gets called back for penalty. So very reminiscent of what Mississippi State went through in week 1 against Southern Miss, where you just have these baffling penalties that come back to bite you in the worst possible spots. Same thing happened to Arizona State. There was some game 1 sloppiness that probably made this thing look a little bit closer than it needed to. And I talked about Mississippi State's post-game adjusted scoring margin per SP Plus against Southern Miss being 30 points. Arizona State in a game they won by 19, it was 31. So if you look at the advanced stats, Arizona State won this game pretty handedly. All the advanced metrics will tell you this game was not as close as the final score indicated, and that it was a lot of Arizona State's just sort of own mistakes getting in their own way. That said, there are things from this game you look at from ASU that were concerning. Like I mentioned, their offensive line. Yeah, like there were some exotic pressures thrown their way that they didn't diagnose the way they would have liked to. But at the same time, you feel like your offensive line should be able to pick those up better. You feel like you should be able to protect a little bit better than they did, and run block a little bit better than they did. Although their running backs did have a lot of success. Although I think some of that is the running backs are really good. Even without Kim Scatabo there, they've got some good backs. But yeah, pass protection, they got in some iffy spots at times. And that's something you would look at as like kind of a concern. And I didn't think Sam Levitt had the greatest game. It looked like he was sort of locked in on Jordan Tyson as top receiver, which if there's one receiver you're going to be locked in on, Jordan Tyson is a really good one because that dude is fantastic. But you didn't see him spread the ball around to other options, including just reading through some of the Arizona State, their beat writers and some of what they had to say. They felt like there were times he had opportunities he could have gone to other receivers, and he was just sort of locked in on his one guy who was often double covered and not always just running free. It's just Jordan Tyson's such an incredible talent. He was able to make plays even when maybe a look wasn't great for him. So yeah, wasn't the greatest performance from Sam Levitt, even though he did put up some big numbers. Defensively, look, they shut down Northern Arizona's run game. You would expect that. But the passing game, they gave up some looks downfield. And again, this is one of those things where I read what the Arizona State people had to say, and they kind of pointed out that Arizona State sort of just stayed in one base look the entire game. And because of that, without much adjusting. So, of course, Northern Arizona was able to figure some things out and find some success against that. Kind of just trusting we can take a vanilla basic game plan here and that be enough for us to get the win, which I understand it. You don't want to put too much out there, but those are things you look at and you're not going to be thrilled, right? For a team that you got high expectations with, even if the post game tells you this was a much bigger blowout than the final score indicates, you're not going to be thrilled by what you saw. That said, I still think Arizona State's a really good team. And we can talk about this offense a little bit here from the Sun Devils. While Sam Levitt did not have a game that blew me away, look, this is a guy that coming into the season, the expectation is that he's one of the top quarterbacks in the country. Last year threw for nearly 2,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, just 6 picks, completed 62% of his passes, and obviously was a threat on the ground. And we saw that in this game against Northern Arizona, where he has on 7 carries, 73 yards, and a pair of touchdowns. Right, and he has one really long touchdown where he scrambles and avoids pressure and then takes it for like a 50-plus yard run. The guy is definitely a threat with his legs, maybe even more so than Braylon Braxton, who State saw a week ago. So you get a little bit of a tune-up from what you saw last week dealing with Braylon Braxton, but I think Levitt is even more of a threat with his legs. Now, as a passer, the arm talent is there. It feels like he does still have some progressing that he has to do. And that he's not, like I kind of mentioned, getting locked in on his top receiver. And Jordan Tyson is outstanding, right? Jordan Tyson is a guy that in this game ends up catching 12 passes for 141 yards and a pair of touchdowns. Right. He's a really, really good player. I mean, he was a 1,000-yard receiver with 10 touchdowns a season ago. And that guy, they'll move him around the field. They'll play him outside and let him win one-on-one balls. They'll put him in the slot to give him better matchups, throw screen passes to him, do run-after-catch stuff. He's an all-around really, really good playmaker. So if you're going to throw to one guy, he's a guy to throw to. But at the same time, though, if you only have one guy you really trust in your passing game, that does limit what you have. And I know he's not supposed to be the only guy, right? They have a tight end they like, and Shimon Matire. They got a couple other receivers they feel pretty good about. But for Levitt to be a more experienced quarterback, you would hope you would see him be able to spread a little bit more than he showed in week 1. So that's something you're going to be watching if you're State defensively in this game, is how does that change week 1 to week 2. Now, they got some talent at running back. Obviously, all the conversation was around losing Cam Scatabo and the massive season he had a year ago. They're in good shape at that position. Raleek Brown is an absolute stud. This is a kid that transferred from USC going into last season and was hurt, did not play last year. In this game, 5 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown doesn't jump off the page, but that's 7.6 a carry. And as a receiver, he caught 3 passes for 13 yards, which, and again, I know that stand out, but like if you go back and this is one of those you got to watch the highlights to see it. And as I mentioned, they had a long screen pass that got taken back. It was his. He had a 75-yard touchdown off a screen pass that was called back for penalty. He is very elusive and speedy in the open field. He is someone that State fans are going to, not State fans, State's defense is going to have to contend with. But also there in the backfield, another kind of dual threat guy, Kyson Brown, caught 6 passes for 72 yards in this game. Also ran the ball, though, for 73 yards on 7 carries. So averaged 10 yards a carry in this game with a long of 34. That's a really talented player. And then a guy who barely got involved, Kanye Udo, 2 carries for 19 yards. So, not going to jump off the page, but that's a guy who a season ago for Army was a 1,000-yard rusher. I know there's all this attention, like Cam Scatabo gone, and obviously he terrorized Mississippi State defensively in this past week. Not past week, past year. They still got talent at running back. They don't got one guy, but they've got a good group there. This game will answer a lot of questions regarding our defense for sure. Yeah, like State's corners, State's whole secondary, I will say, is going to get tested because, okay, you've got something good going now with Kelly Jones and Diego Brumfield. Based off one game, Jordan Tyson is going to match up with them some. They're also going to put Jordan Tyson in the slot. So State's safeties and potentially Isaac Smith, who does play some as a nickel, those guys are going to have to face Jordan Tyson and see how they handle that. And then State's run defense. You got a quarterback that is a great dual threat. You got some running backs who are big-time playmakers in space. This is going to be a big test for State's defense. Now, the one big thing for their offense is their pass protection last week was not great. And I do think if you're State, that is going to be something huge to watch here. Can your defensive line give them problems? Can your defensive line find a way to create more pressure in this game? And I do think if you're State, like I would understand wanting to heat up Tyson a little bit here heat up Levitt a little bit here, because I do think when Levitt gets under pressure, like the takeaway for him is, okay, I got to scramble, I got to get out of the pocket and try to make something happen. And it's a lot of like, screw it, it's either Jordan Tyson's down there somewhere or I'm taking off and running. Both of those things would concern me as outcomes. But I also think there's the chance that you force him into a mistake. So I will be very interested to see what State does in terms of trying to attack Levitt in this game. Now, the other big question I have for State's defense against this offense is what style do they take? Last year, we saw a lot of State playing with the 3-3-5 looks, and it didn't work well last year, especially against Arizona State, who was able to just bully them physically up front, and that you give them those light boxes for Cam Scatterbu to run into, and it killed them. And I do think Arizona State is not the same type of spread team that defense is as effective against. It is a little different this year, though, that you've got better defensive linemen up front. You get Will Whitson being named co-SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week. DeRay Bledsoe had a great game. And you've got some other DJ Reed had a great game. You've got more big bodies up front who could potentially match up against Arizona State's offensive line. Can you get away with having 3 down linemen? And do you want to? Because, look, here's the other thing to remember. When you're playing that style of defense, it's not that we are saying we are trying to shut down the run game. You are saying we are going to force the opposing offense to have to go on long, sustained drives. It is bend, don't break. We are trusting that you are going to make a mistake somewhere along the way. We are trusting that once you get into the red zone and the spacing is tighter, you won't be able to convert. I don't know if I have a good answer. That might be something I have to think on. And when we get to Thursday's show, I have a better answer of which way I want to go. Mm-hmm. How State chooses to play this thing, though, will be very interesting to me. Because I do think there's a point of wanting to pressure Levitt more than maybe you wanted to try to pressure Braxton. But you could also get yourself in some trouble, too, with some of the weapons that they have. I thought it was interesting that State was pretty straight up with the pressure. Wonder if we see a lot more stunts and twists this week. I think last week against Southern Miss, and I talked about this in the postgame, it was very clear to me that approach was what I just talked about. The reason they played so much 3-3-5 was we are just keeping it all in front of us. Southern Miss, over the course of a 4-quarter game, our talent is going to be better than their talent, and if we force them to have to run more plays to be able to score, that's going to show out, and that's exactly what happened. How does that work against Arizona State? That's going to interest me, if that's the approach you take.
Yeah, we talk every week about – I know we just got started with the season. We're recapping week 1, getting ready for week 2. But I think a big challenge, and you kind of hit the nail on the head with it, was Arizona State's got some dudes up front on that offensive line to protect Sam Levitt. And I want to see our defense here for Mississippi State push those guys around. I look at this roster, and quite honestly, I see a lot of young guys. I see maybe 7 or 8 different freshman guys. But then you do have a couple seniors. You have a bunch of sophomores and some still young guys. But more than half these guys are over 315. And those are some big bodies that they can put out there. They have a lot of big guys in that room that they can rotate around. And when you have the defensive front that you have for Mississippi State, you expect, at least for me, I expect them to struggle against those type of bodies up front on the field. But is it too much of a challenge that they can't overcome that? I mean, I thought they did okay at times in the Southern Miss game handling stuff like that. We had mentioned that, it's not every single guy for Southern Miss, but they still had a couple key guys out there that were big enough to push us around. And, that's kind of one of the things I want to see this next week.
Yeah, and look, the way they handled Southern Miss, at the end of the day, they were bigger and better. And Southern was not able to get much of a run game going in that game.
Right.
There's also a point, though, like Southern stylistically, like Southern's run game is built off of spacing and RPO threat. And that's excluding the quarterback run game aspect of it. Everything they want to do running the football is off the fact that we are spreading the field, and then we have the RPO threats that you have to deal with as well. It's a very similar, if not the same type of approach that Mississippi State takes offensively. And I know if you ask the coordinators, offensive line coaches from every single one of these teams, they will tell me that I'm dead wrong. It's all about physicality, and we're trying to be more powerful, stronger than our opponent. I'm just telling you the way these offenses work. The run game functions the way it does because of the spacing, and those type of run games get into trouble, especially against those 3-3-5 type looks that Mississippi State likes to employ. Arizona State's a little bit different story. Like, they're not going to be a 21 or 12 personnel team with any regularity. They're going to spread the field, but they're also, I think, more of a traditional run game, I would say, with some of what they're trying to do in the trenches. They're a little bit more pro style with their approach on the way they want to play things, and that does change things a little bit for you up front. And can you hold up against that will be interesting. And obviously, dealing with how they find matchups for Jordan Tyson is going to be a big challenge for them as well. I think you have to force Sam Leavitt into mistakes. That's what it comes down to. He is still a good quarterback, but ultimately you've got to find a way to force him into mistakes, force him to throw where he doesn't need to. To me, that's probably State's best chances here against ASU. Other side of the ball, Arizona State defensively, look, this is a team that last season allowed 22.6 points a game in the run defense, only 113 yards per game allowed, which is the best in the Big 12. Passing defense wasn't as strong, about 227 yards a game, and but they 16 interceptions, right? And only 6.6 yards per attempt, under 60% completion percentage. So they gave up some yards, but they were also still a pretty good pass defense, all things considered. This is a really good defense for Arizona State a year ago. They got pretty much all those guys back. I think the one guy off the defense that's gone, it's Shamari Simmons at nickel, Caleb McCall at linebacker as well. But defensive line, Layden Smith back, Elijah O'Neal, Prince Dorba, CJ Fight. Like, they got a very veteran and talented defensive line. Now, a veteran and talented defensive line that last year was not super productive for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
That was not a D-line that just had a ton of sacks, had a ton of pressures. But it was a good, solid D-line that they could win with. But, I mean, you look elsewhere on that defense, and Xavier Alford and Miles Rouser back at safety, really, really good. Keith Abney for them at corner is an outstanding player. And in this game, they had a lot of guys make an impact. Linebacker Jordan Crook had a big game for them with 7 tackles and a sack. Keyshawn Elliott is another linebacker for them who had a really nice game, and one of their more veteran guys back as well. There's a lot of experienced pieces back on this defense. They got talent at all 3 levels. Was not a dominant performance for them in week 1, but 3 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 5 pass deflections. They got like 1 interception. They did give up some passing yards. Northern Arizona was able to find something in the pass game, but look, this is a pretty solid defense. I don't think they're a dominant unit for what it's worth. I don't think this is a defense that's going to go out and just play shutdown. But look, Mississippi State a season ago in this game, they could not run the football at all against Arizona State's front. They could not get the run game going whatsoever. Their pass protection was bad, and the game very much became a case of State's receivers having to step up and make plays. Can they do that again this year? And is that what they're going to have to do this year? Or can they find some success on the ground? That'll be a big question. This was a good run defense a season ago, a good run defense that faced offenses that play similar styles to what Mississippi State wants to do. But obviously State's bigger, stronger up front. Like, State's offensive line is definitely going to get put to the test here against Arizona State.
Yeah, it's going to be put to the test. And, I also think that it goes both ways here. I think that there's going to be a test for the front 7 of Arizona State's defense. I think there's more so the challenge, like you just put it, for the offensive line for State. But again, this is a team that brought back some good talent from making the playoffs last year. Let's be honest. I think Sam Leavitt and Cam Scatteraboo is what got them in the playoffs last year, and what led them to a 10-win season and the success they had winning the Big 12. Which I'm not taking anything away from that. That's amazing. That's great. But I feel like this year, yes, they have Sam Leavitt. They don't have the backs like Scatteraboo or that standout typical guy that they can lean on for team success. I'm not saying that they don't have the talent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's not that one standout guy, but they have some dudes that have made some progress over the last few years, brought in some transfers, and overall, I mean, they worked really hard this offseason, I'm sure. It's going to be a very interesting game um, this week, and one guy that stood out to me from this past week for them was Elijah O'Neal on the defensive line. Had a sack and 3 tackles. Dude's big, kind of big, I guess. 6'4", 260, some pretty good size. Um, so I mean, it's guys like that are probably going to be difference makers all year long if they could stay healthy. It's just, it's still too early to tell what you're getting from this Arizona State defense against the offensive line for teams like Mississippi State, I think.
Yeah, look, this is going to be a big test, both sides of the ball. For State offensively in this game, just looking back, they had 24 rushing yards a season ago. Now, they lost some of that to sacks, but they could not run the ball in this game. 268 through the air, though, and they were able to find some success throwing the football. That was a little bit of a better game for Blake Shapen once they got settled in. And I thought he was actually in that game. They were able to find some receivers down the field on a few different occasions. You're kind of hoping for some of the same here, but you got to be able to protect them better. And you do have to be able to get to the run game when you need to. That was another thing. You look at this game a season ago is when they had looks to run the football, they were not able to run the football, which was kind of an issue for them, especially early in the season. You had some of those issues in week one. Like State's offensive line, that's kind of the big thing for me going into this game is how big of a step forward can it take from where they were a week ago against Southern Miss where they had some issues. That's really going to ultimately determine a lot of what they're able to do here, whether or not they're going to have much of a chance. Well, let's talk about the Kenny Dillingham comment here. So I'll pull up the kind of the whole quote. But he says, we stay about 50. He was asked a question about traveling to these games, and I'm trying to think about it. Right? He was asked about going to some of these smaller towns, being in Tempe, and then where do you go on the road to a place like Mississippi State, going to Starkville, and for the hotel situation. And he makes a comment that we stay about an hour and 15 minutes away from the stadium this week because that's the nearest hotel that's not a casino. And he was talking big picture because I guess they've done this in other weeks that they find themselves having to stay away from campus a little bit more, which is not a unique thing. Visiting teams often don't stay within the city of the place they're traveling to unless it's a big city because, hotel options are going to be a little bit more limited. It's not just a matter of whether or not they're hotels. It's do you have a hotel that has the amenities you need for a football team, which I'm sure teams have stayed in Starkville and had issues over the years. I don't know for sure. But it's also a distraction thing. You don't want to let them be in the college town that they're visiting, so we want to keep them away where they're a little bit – we can kind of keep our taps on all of our guys. Mm-hmm. I don't think Kenny Dillingham was trying to take a shot at Starkville here because I don't think Kenny Dillingham knows anything about Starkville. He's never coached here. Perhaps he's recruited at one point or another in town, so maybe passed through, but I doubt he has any sort of understanding of the city. I take it he is just going off of whatever their team travel coordinator had to say. And they were like, this is the situation for the week. The problem is their understanding of the situation is sorely mistaken because there are no casinos in Starkville. The nearest is like 45 minutes away. And there's also several hotels in Starkville. Now, again, whether or not those hotels fit the amenities that they're looking for, when it comes to a visiting football team, I don't know. I actually have not stayed at a Starkville hotel because I don't think I have. Maybe I have once. It's been a long time. I think I stayed in a hotel like right outside of town one time. So I've not been in Starkville hotels. I do know there are several right close to campus. Now, again, if you don't want to have your guys there because you want to keep them reined in, that's fine. This whole idea of, this is the only hotel that does not a casino, that is absurd. That is a complete misunderstanding of the actual situation. Am I going to get fired up for this? No. Because again, I don't think Dillingham was trying to make a shot, but whoever put that out there and whoever told him that is stupid. They are stupid. Like, it's a complete misunderstanding. And it just, even if not intentional, it just continues to play into this narrative about Starkville, of the town being this awful place to be, and like, why would you ever want to spend time there? William FC, I don't know if what he's talking about. The microtel on Highway 82 is awesome. I think that's actually the only hotel I've stayed at in Starkville, because I think that was when I was there for orientation. I think we stayed at the microtel on Highway 82. But there are some nicer hotels there, right in the heart of the Cotton District, right across from campus. Again, if those don't fit your needs, that's fine. But whoever is thinking this whole idea of it's all casinos, you're stupid. It's not casinos around there. Again, the closest one's like 40 minutes away. Most of the casinos in Mississippi are down where I'm at, here on the coast, where like that's where most of them are. It was a dumb comment. Again, it plays into dumb narratives about Starkville. I don't think ill will was meant, but this is one of those things of like, whoever told him that clearly just doesn't know what they're talking about. And we'll see if Mississippi State finds motivation off of it. They're going to need to find motivation because this is a big game. Blackout game in Starkville. They're wearing the black uniforms that look fantastic. One of my favorite uniform State has released to this point. Should be a fun crowd. I think you did enough in week 1 to get a good crowd and environment here in Starkville, and should be a fun atmosphere. This is a big game for the season. Now, there's been a lot of debate over, must win versus, or I guess maybe not versus, but like, is must win? Is this a game that determines whether or not this season is going to be a success? I'm on record that I've called this the most important game of the year. Now, I have called it that from the mindset of this is a huge opportunity and what it could mean for the season. I think win or lose, it can be a tone setter, in that your performance in this game could say a lot about what this team is likely to be the rest of the way. There are some, though, who seem to be taking an approach of like, if State loses this game, it is a massive disappointment problem for the season. And I've seen that from a few different places. I've seen some fans pushing that on Twitter, and like Mississippi State just should beat Arizona State. And I don't know. I do feel like this team is still really good. I guess I'll ask you first. I mean, your mindset. Okay, let me before I ask you, let me set the stage. Part of the argument is that if you're going to make a bowl game, you have to win this game, because your likelihood of being able to find 3 SEC wins against this SEC schedule is incredibly slim. And I do agree with that. For State to go to a bowl game this year, you kind of have to go 4-0 in the non-conference. It is very unlikely you're going to be able to find 3 conference wins this season. However, whether or not you put this as a must-win then determines, okay, are you saying that the only way this is a successful season is State goes to a bowl game? I don't. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, how? I guess let's start. How are you defining success for Mississippi State this season? That is a successful year for Mississippi State, the baseline of what it has to be?
Some of you State fans out there aren't going to want to hear this, but if you go 5-7 and you're just one game shy, don't call for Levy to go out of town. Now, if they make a bowl game somehow, that'd be amazing. We'd love it. As far as this game goes, if you win, you have Alcorn State next. You have NIU. There's a good possibility, and by the way, those games are at home. There's a good possibility you're already 4-0. And then you're probably losing to Tennessee, A&M. Could you compete with teams like Florida? I mean, you just look at the schedule. There's not going to be many other games that you could catapult to 6 wins. As far as Arizona State goes, we talked about them tonight. We talked about they were a playoff team last year. Kenny Dillingham is a really good coach. Sam Levitt, pretty good quarterback. This is a game that I view as I think you just want to be competitive. You don't want this team to run all over you. You want to be competitive. If you fail and come up short by a possession or two, especially, I say this, if it's more than 10 or 14 points and Arizona State beats Mississippi State, maybe I could get being upset over that. But I think you got to at least make it, especially if it's a one possession game. Do you really need to come out on top in this one? But let's say if you do, it could be a momentum builder for Mississippi State to then win the games against Alcorn and NIU, which I think are gimme games anyway. But again, you got teams like Florida on that schedule that you just have to look out for and be careful with. But I think if you could beat a team like Arizona State, I don't see why later on you can't beat a team like Florida or whoever and get an SEC win.
Yeah, so again, from an opportunity standpoint and what it could mean, I agree, which is why I do call this game incredibly important. And Tucker
Mm-hmm.
here, I'd say a loss is more missed opportunity than anything else, but a blowout loss would make it hard to get fans to buy into Lebby again this offseason, barring
Yeah.
something unforeseen. I agree with that. And Christian was just talking about it. Getting blown out is a problem. I think, yes, you need to be competitive in this game because you need to show at home quality opponent stepping in. We can look the part of a team that can compete. My
Mm-hmm.
issue is with the people saying that, like, you've got to win this game. And it's like, well, the only way, because you got to win this game because the only chance of going to a bowl is if you win the game. I don't think it's fair to put a bowl game as the expectation on this team. And I understand people are going to hear that and say that's loser talk, that's poor old state mentality. The reality of the situation is you were 2-10 a year ago. You're still in a
Mm-hmm.
complete major roster overhaul. And you have one of the toughest schedules in the country. I get it's Arizona State, and they do feel much more beatable than some of the other teams on the schedule. They're still a team that went to the playoff last year and brings most everybody back. I have a hard time saying that you've got to win that game in order for the you be the success because, well, the only way to success is going to a bowl game. I just think setting a bowl
Right.
game as the expectation against the schedule is the problem. Like I feel like to me, if you were saying you have to win this game, you were saying the only way you were going to be pleased with the season is if they reach bowl eligibility, which I think is an unfair expectation to hold this team to, given the circumstances, given the schedule. It's not me trying to have a loser mentality for Mississippi State. It's me looking at the schedule, looking at the circumstances, and saying, look, man, they could be a whole lot better this year and still not go to a bowl. I have said many times they could play bowl caliber. They could be a team that in a normal year with a normal schedule, you say they could go 6-6,
Mm-hmm.
and be 4-8. Like I have thought it is possible this team ends up being 4-8, and you look up at the end of the year and it's like, yeah, man, that team actually wasn't that bad, all things considered. I think a lot of teams confused. I don't demand a bowl game this year with I never expect MSU to make a bowl game. Yes, I do think that is something that happens. Like it feels like there's a little bit of a combating that happens amongst MSU fans right now, especially as we've been in this era of like people trying to push MSU forward and grow MSU athletics in the direction they want to see, getting away from old Mississippi State, the poor old Mississippi State. And it's like the people who are pushing for that, if you say anything other than like, I expect this program to be a contender, it's like you're one of the ones holding the program back. And it's like, no, man, like I do think Mississippi State can get back to being a good competitive program consistently. I'm not going to sit here talking about being a contender, but I think they can get to I think the level they got to under Dan Mullen is not completely out of the question. Now we'll see what that means in the future SEC with a new schedule. But I also can look at them this year and be like, I just don't think they're there yet. And I don't necessarily expect them to be there yet because it's going to be tough to get back to that point. My thing for this year is far less about the result, is just looking at the product on the field. Like, are they playing like a quality, competent football team? As TCU is breaking out a long run here against a Bill Belichick
Oh,
defense.
I know.
That's very funny.
Oh my gosh, this is
Go
awesome.
Frogs. Uh, It's okay,
TCU.
Bill. You have to go
TCU.
to. Um, no, look, this team for me, it is about again product on the field. Do you look improved? And like week 1, they looked improved. There were some issues, but like, and yes, being competitive in this game is a big deal because if you do get blown out, and Tucker mentioned it with his comment earlier, people are going to have a hard time getting on board because it's like, okay, same old thing. Like week 1 doesn't matter. We're Southern Miss, bad team. This team's just going to suck and get demanded every single, get blown out every single week that they're on the field. I get why you need to play well in this game. I also agree and understand that if you're going to make a bowl game, you have to win this game because realistically, fighting 3 SEC wins is so tough. I don't think it is a fair expectation to put on the program to say, if you don't win this game, then that is a failure for Lebby and his staff. It's a big opportunity. It's not a failure. You have to. I feel like I don't know. I just feel like there needs to be some.
I feel like there should not be a single game. Now, maybe I'm wrong on this. I don't think there should be a single game on the schedule that you say if you lose this, you're out of here or you're on the hot seat or anything like that. Now, I get
Well,
they
there's a
got to be
couple.
better than 2. Well, yeah. I get they got to be better than 2 wins last year, probably better than 3, maybe get close to a bowl game and go 5-7. But for the most part, is there really that game on that schedule that says, man, if he loses this one, he's out the door? I mean, that's like this
It was
weekend.
last week
We
or 2 days ago.
right.
Like now, Northern Illinois, if you like, you're not losing to Alcorn State. And if I'm wrong
Right.
on that, well then okay. But you're not going to. Yeah, Tucker said lose to Alcorn State, and it will. That shouldn't happen. I don't see a world where that happens. That's a different discussion. Northern Illinois, I'm not. I respect NIU. I respect Thomas Hammock in that program. I get they beat Notre Dame a year ago, and that's been a pretty good MAC team. I don't think they're going to be very good this year. So if Mississippi State loses that game, okay, we're right back on like, okay, Jeff Lebby just doesn't have it. The game, though, that was like, you have got to win it was 2 days ago because of what happened in year 1, the fact that it's an in-state opponent and what that means, the fact that there is some semblance of rivalry aspect to it, which made it a bigger deal, and that you cannot let that program beat you when you are supposed to be far and away better year in and year out. Lebby needed to have a good showing in week 1. They got an okay showing, which I guess if you want to say that puts the pressure on week 2 to come out and look even better, sure. My thing is here, like, I'm not going to walk away if they lose this game and be like, that's a big problem. I just think it is. You need to come out and be competitive. Now, for the non-bad teams on the schedule the rest of the way, is there any one where if you lose it, it's the end of the world? No. I do think for the course of the season, you need to look competitive throughout much of those games. Like, I get it. Georgia, Texas, and I know Texas looked terrible. It was Ohio State. Like, you get blown out in those games. Like, they didn't look terrible. Their defense was fine. It was Arch. You get blown out in those games, and there's a couple other SEC opponents to here or there. If you get blown out, it might just happen. You do need to look competitive throughout much of the season. I can't put so much on this game as if this thing determines whether or not Jeff Lebby's tenure is going to move in the right direction. Like, you have to win this game for the tenure to go the direction that we want it to go. Now, the opportunity is there. If you win it, you feel fantastic. Okay, win over a top 12, potentially top 10 team, win over a team that was a conference champion, playoff team a season ago, in front of your own fans to start the year 2-0. If you start 2-0, you're starting 4-0 because you're not going to lose to Alcorn and NIU. You're a 4-0 football team with Tennessee coming to town. A Tennessee team that, frankly, I mean, look, they played well week 1. They looked better than I thought they would. Scored a lot more points than I thought they would. Defense gave them some points, though. But then it's like, that is a massive opportunity, Tennessee coming to town, and what that means. I fully understand and recognize the opportunity ahead of you. If you win this game, it becomes a full-on, all right, Jeff Lebby's got this thing moving in the right direction. Not just moving in the right direction. Like, it's more like Lebby is the guy. We know Jeff Lebby is going to be the guy to lead this program. But if you lose, as long as you're competitive, I still am going to say, all right, this team's better this year. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. I'm not going to freak out over it. the big thing for me. But look, it's definitely a big opportunity. And look, last year Arizona State was in a similar spot. Last year, Arizona State, coming off of year one of Kenny Dillingham, where they went 3-9, they had more to hang on to than Mississippi State did because they picked up a couple conference wins. They had a big win over UCLA. That was a big deal for that program, where they really had to grind it out and just find a way to win. State didn't get that last year. State got games where they played tough. They played tough at Georgia. They played tough at Texas. They played tough against Texas A&M. They played tough in the Egg Bowl. They didn't get the win, though, that Kenny Dillingham was able to get year one. But Kenny Dillingham goes into year two with a bunch of new transfers, reloaded roster, and they're able to get SEC team coming into town week 2 of the season, fired up fan base, and they get a statement win. You wouldn't say statement win after the year when it's Mississippi State, because Mississippi State ended up being terrible. It was a statement at the time, though, because it's like, oh, man, look at Arizona State. Like, they just beat Mississippi State. Nobody saw that coming. Like, people were going in talking about Arizona State going into last year like they might go winless in their non-con, because Arizona State's non-con last year was Wyoming, who is generally a good G5, Texas State, who was one of the most hyped up G5s, and then Mississippi State. They went 3-0 in those games. And that was a huge thing for them. Mississippi State, there's kind of a similar vibe here. Like, a bunch of people were picking Southern Miss to beat Mississippi State. There was a lot of when people realized that was a game, it was like, uh-oh, Mississippi State's going on the road week 1 against Southern Miss. That's not a surefire win. And then Northern Illinois, they beat Notre Dame. Mississippi State's not going to just get that win. And Arizona State, well, that's a playoff team. No chance Mississippi State's winning that game. There's kind of a similar vibe going into the season. And both teams were picked. Mississippi State picked dead last in the SEC. Arizona State was picked dead last in the Big 12 going into last year. I am not at all sitting here telling you Mississippi State's turning this thing around to win the conference the way that ASU did. But beating Mississippi State was a statement win for them early and a momentum-building win early. This game can be the same for Mississippi State, which is why I'm not trying to downplay the importance of it when I say that I don't consider it a must-win. I'm not trying to act as though it's fine if State goes out and just doesn't have a good performance. I think State needs to perform well. I understand what it could mean for them for the rest of the season. It does set the stage if you find a win. But I do think you do have to rethink expectations a little bit in terms of the big picture. College football slate is so a little light, so if we win, probably the talk of college football for 24, 48 hours. It is a big opportunity to get spotlight. Like, there will be a spotlight on Stark if Mississippi State wins this game. I fully get the opportunity. Believe me, I understand the potential at hand that you could capture the nation with a win. I just don't want to turn this into, if Mississippi State doesn't win, it's a problem. Let's get into making some predictions for this game. And obviously, look, we're still a little bit early on this. Maybe in the Thursday show, if we have further thoughts, we'll give some more on those, more predictions. But Christian, what is one thing you want to see out of the Bulldog offense against Arizona State?
Well, I mentioned earlier that they had a little bit of a slow start in last week's game. I want them to not be afraid to start fast. I want to see them. Obviously, we talk about Fluff and Davon Booth. We talk about the run game, great backs, all that good stuff. I want to see some receivers step up a little bit more in this game, and I want to see them light up this defense, because Arizona State's got some dudes in the secondary, and I'm not saying that they need to go out there and look like 2018 Bama with Tua and Jerry Jeudy and all them, but I want them to open up the passing game, not be afraid to roll the dice a little bit, and overall just make big plays. I don't see why they can't do that against Arizona State. Now, I'm not taking anything away from them. They had a pretty good defense last year, but at the same time, I felt like it was a little suspect at times throughout the season. I felt like the offense was the key thing that carried them, and I feel like that might be the factor in this game too. I think you got to take advantage of the fact that Arizona State is not this like top of the world defense.
For me, I need the offensive line to play a clean game. You cannot have the penalties you had last week. Southern Miss was not able to take advantage of the fact that Mississippi State continually shot themselves in the foot. If you make mistakes against Arizona State, they are going to blow you out. Now, they're a team that was penalty-ridden a week ago as well. They're going to be trying to clean up those same type of mistakes. We might be looking up and say whoever plays the cleaner game here ends up winning. So if you're Mississippi State, you have to take care of business in that aspect. You cannot have the same issues you did last week. Blocking has to be better, right? When you have looks to run the football, you have a favorable box to run into, you need to be able to block it up well enough to let Devon Booth and Fluff Bothvogel, and Johnny Daniels for that matter, who had a good game with limited touches on Saturday, let those guys be able to go to work. When you go to throw the football, Blake Shapen needs to be protected. He did not have time to throw in this game a year ago. Arizona State was able to get after him with pass rush throughout the game. Can't happen. You've got to be able to protect it. State's offensive line has to step up. The performance they put together in week 1 against Southern Miss is not going to be anywhere close to good enough. If State's offensive line plays like they played in week 1, they're probably going to lose this game by a lot. They'll definitely lose. It'll probably be by a lot. Over on the other side of the ball, what do you want to see out of the State defense?
Yeah, I think I brought up this quote earlier, but I had listened and read some stuff before the show. Jeff Lebby said today that he wanted to see them he said he wants to see them gang tackle these guys against Arizona State and emphasize stopping the run and playing very aggressive. Now, I don't know what gang tackling looks like, Andrew. Whatever that is, I love the effort and I love the enthusiasm there. So I honestly I don't know if I go that far. I don't want to see them turn into this Georgia defense and be on top of the world and stuff, but I just want to see some effort out there. I just want to see if they could be consistent, get off the field on third down quite a bit. I mean, yeah, you're going to give up some points. It's Arizona State and Sam Levitt. They have dudes to make big plays, but overall, I just hope that they don't have those moments where we can't get off the field on third down and we can't stop the run every other play. And I just want to see some consistency, but I also hope there's those moments where they fail a little bit, but then they're not afraid to get back up and keep on punching.
I think I know every State fan right now is screaming that they want to see State play with 4 down linemen and they want to see them stop the run because of the way last year's game went. I am still not fully set on what I think is going to be the best approach for them in this game against Arizona State. And no, obviously, if you're going to get gashed in the run game, then you're probably in trouble. I do look back, though, and I think a lot of State's issues in the run. And I know people will say once State adjusted their defense, Arizona State was not running the balls effectively. I do get that. I also think Arizona State very much took their foot off the gas last year. Because if you look at Arizona State's last drive, State was playing with a loaded box and putting 4 guys on the line as well, and they still found ways to run the football. I just think it was Arizona State kind of just took their foot off the gas, and that's why the defense was able to have a little bit more success there. I'm gonna table the whole run defense discussion for a second. They've got to find a way to contain Sam Levitt, which does include the run defense because he's a guy who's a threat with his legs. I think Sam Levitt is still a quarterback that if you can get pressure on him, he can make mistakes throwing the football. Like he can try to make some throws he doesn't need to make. I think he's going to want to force the ball to Jordan Tyson, who obviously is an outstanding playmaker, and dealing with him is going to be a big deal. But I, at the same time, think you have to find a way to pressure him and contain him. You cannot let him scramble the way that he was able to scramble in week 1. You cannot let him scramble the way he scrambled against Mississippi State a season ago. There were a couple times State had opportunities to get him down for negative plays, and he was able to take off and run. So that is going to be a big thing for me. Can you contain Sam Levitt? And can you create pressure and can you contain him? If you can do those things, I think State's defense is going to have a good chance in this game. Again, we're going to table the run defense thing for now. What's a player you're looking to have a big game, either because you think it's going to happen or you you think it needs to happen? And we'll start with the offense.
A lot of different guys to choose from. I'm gonna go Sedu Traore, the tight end,
Traore.
had what's that?
Traore.
Traore. Sorry, I'll get used to it. 5 receptions, 77 yards last week, a touchdown. Averaged Andrew 15.4 yards a catch.
Most of that was on one play.
Yeah, that is true. But I feel like he could be a big factor this week. I feel like the tight end room is going to be amped up and ready to go. I feel like the receivers are really. That's my offensive player right there.
For me, I'm going to go hand in hand to what I talked about with I need State's offensive line to step up. I need Jimothy Lewis to have a big game. I don't know that Blake Steen's going to be ready to go for them, but even if he is, I think Jimothy Lewis is probably your guy at tackle, at left tackle, and with Albert Reese playing at right tackle. Jimothy Lewis, I talked about him in the preseason as a guy that it's like that's a player that can change the ceiling for this team if you can get big time play out of a left tackle who's got your highest player who's got the highest athletic ceiling. He needs to, like, this is going to be the first major test. Like, again, I don't think Arizona State's defensive line are world beaters. I think but it's a good group of solid players and a good group of guys who are good college players. This is the first big test, and I think he's going to get a lot of playing time, and I need Jimothy Lewis to have a big game. If Jimothy Lewis performs well, I'm going to feel pretty good about State's offense having a better day and giving themselves a chance against Arizona State. Defensively, who do you go with?
A couple different key pieces out there. I'm going to roll the dice with Jalen Smith, the linebacker out of Tennessee that came in this year. On his own last week, 3 tackles, 4 assists for 7 total tackles last week. I like the performance he had last week, and I feel like he could be a great addition to this defense overall. I think that you could see him making some big plays, disrupting the pass game. I like it.
Yeah, and considering Arizona State's got some running backs to deal with, he's definitely going to get involved in that way. That's a guy that there were some high expectations when he was added, and hey, look, had a good game in week 1, being tied for the team lead in tackles. I can go a few different ways here, and this is a player that we feel like we shouldn't be able to talk about, but I do feel like this is an Isaac Smith game because I can see a few different ways that Isaac Smith may have to get involved and may have to step up and play at a high level, which you expect him to every single week. He's the best defender you have. What are you shaking your head at? Is it
I just TCU just running all over Bill Belichick, man? Not you. I'm shaking my head at my
I
TV.
figured it was the game, but I know for the people watching, they don't know that you're watching.
No, you're good, man. Keep going.
Oh yeah, I just saw the touchdown run.
Dang.
This is very funny to see. But Isaac Smith, I look at this in a few different ways. One, we know Arizona State's got some talented running backs. Like, he's a guy that's going to have to deal with that because of someone who's a factor in stopping the run. He is also now someone that playing more as a linebacker off the edge, you could use him in some pressure looks and have him getting after Sam Levitt. I wouldn't be surprised if he is a guy that is spying Sam Levitt throughout this game and that you were saying we cannot let Sam Levitt be the one to take off and run with the football. Like, we need to let Isaac Smith be the one to track him down. But I also talked about, like, there's situations where Isaac Smith is going to play some nickel for you. And Jordan Tyson is a receiver that, primarily plays outside, but they'll put him in the slot too. So I could see Isaac Smith having to potentially cover a really good receiver. I don't think State would try to put him in a lot of those situations. I think they would want him to be more in a spot where he can just sort of get after whoever the ball carrier is and cover. Maybe when you do play coverage, you're having him play as a spy. But again, I think there's a chance that he gets matched up with some really talented playmakers. And with Isaac Smith, you're going to need a big game out of him. You need a big game out of him most weeks. And again, he's kind of the cheat answer because he is the top player on defense. But I do think this is a game where you need him to shine because of some of the different ways that Arizona State could potentially hurt you. Let's go ahead and make a prediction. And look, it's early. We're still going to know. We can always change things later in the week when we make our SEC picks. But right off the bat, what are your early thoughts? Mississippi State taking on the Sun Devils in Starkville Saturday night, blackout game.
Tough environment, tough crowd, going to be rocking, going to be a big game. I see our offense doing pretty good. I also see Arizona State doing pretty good. A little low scoring, but well, I say it's in the middle. It's closer to low scoring than it is high scoring, I guess. I don't know. What do you consider high scoring these days? I'm going to say Arizona State wins by 5. I'm going to say a close one, but I feel like there's not enough gas in the tank for Mississippi State to get the win. I'm going to say 28-23 Sun Devils.
Yeah, so Arizona State is a 6.5-point favorite, over under 58.5. That's according to FanDuel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of in a similar spot to you. I'm not going to change my prediction. I had Arizona State winning this game preseason. I think the Sun Devils ultimately get the win. I do think State will be able to be competitive, and I think the home atmosphere and an improved defense will let them be able to make some plays and keep this thing from being crazy high scoring. State's offensive line, though, does concern me, and I am worried about that as a limiting factor. I'm honestly going to go with a pretty similar score to what we saw a season ago. Arizona State 30. I'll say Arizona State 30.
Okay.
Arizona State wins 30-24, which is like a point off from where this was last season. I'll say 30-24 for the Sun Devils get the win. Competitive game. State's offense will have some plays and give themselves a chance, but I ultimately think just a little bit too strong of an opponent here early in the season for me to take the Bulldogs to get the win. So both of us have a competitive game, but both of us have the Bulldogs falling. Again, we'll have more thoughts on the matchup later in the week. We'll be back on Thursday to talk about Mississippi State with the Sun Devils. That'll be our call-in show. Last week we had a couple callers get involved. We appreciate those who were a part of that, and we hope to see some of you there and give us your thoughts on the matchup, hear what you have to say. We'll also be making our picks for the SEC and also for the biggest games across college football for week 2. I did not even go and look back at how we did in week 1. I guess we'll save that for the next show. And we'll take a look at how we did, where our records fall after week 1. But yeah, it should be a fun show later in the week. Again, call-in show, your opportunity to give your thoughts on the Bulldogs. I appreciate all of you who wrote out with us in this show, or part of the chat and the interaction. We love to have it. Really appreciate all of you and just how this channel has been able to continue to grow. So if you haven't already, leave us a like. If you could subscribe to the channel, turn on that notification bell so you know when we do go live. And hey, share this to all your friends who are Bulldogs because we want to continue keeping this thing growing. We will see you all on Thursday. Later.
See y'all. Love y'all.